Welcome, everyone. According to the program, I've already given my presentation, so that was good, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, wow, I'm impressed. As far as seating, we've actually got more participants here, or we've got more people visiting us than we have seats. However, you will be able at least to hear the audio also in the fellowship hall, so you won't be lacking my sage advice, come closer. Let me give you some good words of wisdom, okay? Yep. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Chris Miller. I am the current president of the Grand Rapids Amateur Astronomical Association. I got that out straight without having to trip over it. Hey. Thank you. I will now leave. Okay. And welcome to this, 50th plus one anniversary of the 1970 dedication of the James C. Veen Observatory. And we are soon to hear stories from individuals to celebrate our past and where it has brought us. This is not unlike the tradition of honoring Christian saints. Yes, saints. Not in the common understanding of sanitized, perfect people who can do no wrong, like the treatment of Grimm's fairy tales by Walt Disney. No, we will hear how real people made progress on a journey to a destination we now know only after the fact. Yes, there were failures, and I hope we will get to hear some of these because they are what make the stories real. Life is messy, and we are rightly suspicious when it is presented otherwise. What is left out of the sanitized version is the exercise of free will, the ability to own our failures, and I've got a few, but to make a conscious choice to press on, to dare mighty things. This expression, used by Theodore Roosevelt and recently coded into the parachute for the Perseverance lander, is never a straight and narrow path. For my part, I would have the last 5 years and perhaps 2,000 hours of work, somewhere around there, invested to showcase the natural beauty of our 16-acre property as my success. Actually, in this story, I would even say that COVID-19 was a blessing because it gave me the opportunity to complete the work on the pathways that you will be hearing more about later. And further, on another front, it gave me the freedom to climb far enough up the astrophotography learning curve to make me want to do more. And that is what. So, I have here a lengthy list of acknowledgments to present here. First of all, it's truly a heartfelt thanks to the Genesis Church for providing this worship, this space, and their accommodations for this. It has worked out very well for us. And to Brian Dornbos Ross, who has been our mentor here and our guide, and could not have been more accommodating. Also, for all those lunches that we've just consumed, we will thank the McCarthy family, Gordon Food Service, and Meyer, plus some individual donors. The wonderful graphics that you saw out in the lobby area and our 50th anniversary logo were done by Emily Romey. Is Emily here? Put her hand up. That right here. Yep. And she has been a go-to person for our graphic needs, and also our website is also great, mostly from her contribution. An acknowledgement to Angela McBride. Where is she at? Where's the McBride clan? Back here. There they are, yes. And for the wonderful floral arrangements that we have. Do we have Luke Schuster here? He's an Eagle, he did an Eagle Scout project for us to create some memorial benches for us that are distributed around on the pathways at the Veen. And I will now call for all saintly former presidents to please stand. No, Gary, no, yeah, that's it. Thank you, thank you. And these are the people that have made the people who have made today possible. I want to thank them for that. Now, we're going to dig back for the saints who helped with the construction between 1965 and 1970. Get up. Come on. Yeah. There we go, Brian. We'll give you a moment. Yeah. The legacy lives on, hopefully for another 50 years. Wouldn't that be neat? Okay. And finally, I wanted to have the saintly members of the Veen and the Marin families stand up. Thank you so much. And again, this would all be imaginary without you. Okay. Why, thank you. Okay. I will be turning this over now to Dave DeBruyn. Is he? Oh, he's at the back of the room to come forward and introduce our speakers. So, Dave, the podium is yours.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this will be history in the making. I had nicely organized speeches in a white notebook, which has totally disappeared from the face of the earth. Everybody's looking and looking and looking. I brought it in when I came. It isn't under all of that, is it, Jack? Chris, did you hide it somewhere? He's always picking up after me. And I had it when I walked in. We were busy talking to people, and it totally disappeared. So David Staskevich, are you responsible for this? Dorimo, are you responsible for this? I've got the whole world looking for it. In the meantime, the show must go on. So immediately we are going to depart from tradition, and instead of introducing all four of the speakers at once, I think I will concentrate on the first one. And while he's talking as long as possible, we're going to be looking for the notebook. It's in this building somewhere. And I think it would be, after spending 3 or 4 days on preparing it, I would hope it will turn up. Whoever did this, please. This is a retrospective. We asked 4 distinguished alumni of the Grand Rapids Amateur Astronomical Association to return. We're going to give all of them a cup. That will be the sum total of their... You didn't hide my notebook, did you? She wants to go look in my car, doesn't she? Oh, dear. Well, one thing you learn after 80 years on the surface of the earth is to laugh at yourself. And I know I walked in the door with me. But our very first speaker this evening, as we look back at a retrospective of various stages in the development of the observatory, is somebody who I've known since he was probably about 15 years old, and who helped us lay blocks and worked part-time at the planetarium, at the Public Museum, was a stalwart in the junior section of the Astronomy Club. His name is Tom Strikwerda. He is that lanky-looking Dutch kid that you saw on some of these pictures up on the screen earlier, and also was a person who really we relied on a lot in the early days. Oh, here comes the notebook. I'm going to still ad-lib. Oh. And Tom in 1970 married the distinguished Donna Steelman. Asher, let's hear it. It was in the car, huh?
And this is the time. This is the time for us to own our failures. and press on regardless.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Chris, that I blamed you for this too.
Well, that's okay.
I
I'm
blame
a
it.
big boy. I can handle that.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say, this is a real story, folks. Remember.
And all of this is documented on the video. It's called the gag reel. All right, let's get back to the script, shall we? Thank you, all of you that turned heaven and earth upside down. Tom Strikwerda married the lovely Donna Steensma, I believe, and it was in 1970 on the campus of Calvin College. I remember it well. I went there. I hope you remember it, Tom. And then it was on to the University of Virginia, and then to the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University for a long and distinguished career as an aerospace engineer and administrator. He played a key role in a number of space probes, including Messenger to Mercury and a probe that went to an asteroid. But his real crowning achievement was as head of the guidance team that got New Horizons to the planet Pluto within about 8 minutes, I think, of its predicted arrival time, something like that. That was Tom Strikwerda from the GRAAA. And that was a 9-year mission, and during those 9 years, he retired. But they invited him back to participate in the triumph of reaching Pluto successfully. And then he, after that, went on to speak occasionally back in his hometown, and he's going to do so right now. Then I'll introduce the other 3 speakers while I try to get myself organized. Tom?
Thank you, Dave, for that wonderful introduction. Well, it's good to be back here. I come back about once a year to visit family who's still around in the area. So this was a good time to come back and visit and also participate in this celebration. Dave asked me to reflect on the very early years of the building of the James C. Veen Observatory. And I don't really recall, maybe Dave actually has a better memory of this, how I got involved in GRAAA and the planetarium. I know I took a class at junior college when I was still in high school, and I remember being at the planetarium doing some of these part-time jobs with making signs and things of that sort. Somewhere along the line, Dave got me involved in this building of the observatory. I really thank Dave in a great way for being a mentor during those years, because I think he certainly contributed to my desire to continue my education in physics and go on to get a PhD in astronomy at the University of Virginia, and from there eventually become like an aerospace engineer. So Dave deserves a lot of credit. Thank you very much, Dave, for putting me on a good path. Now, my memories, that's a long time ago, 50 years ago, and I was a kid, so, you're involved in a lot of things. So my memories are not real distinct, but I do remember those, one word that summarizes my memory of that time, and many of the old timers will probably remember that word too. It's clear as a bell in my memory. That word is mortar. So Dave would pick us up in this old green station wagon from the museum, stop by the house early on Saturday morning, pick up maybe a couple of the guys and come out here, and we'd work all day. The kids would put to work digging ditches, making forms, mixing concrete, hauling block. But if that call came, mortar, you dropped what you did. Just stop, right? Stop in your tracks, drop that shovel, and go mix more mortar, because this guy, it had to have just the right consistency, or he would complain. He was really our master block layer, and what he said would rule the day. So I often wonder what the neighbors, if they were within earshot of of mortar what they thought was going on up there on that hill, especially the strange building with 2 silos and a connecting building, what that was. This was time of just sort of past the peak of the Cold War. They probably thought it was some sort of bunker that to protect us from the Soviets. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I was in high school when this project began, so I didn't come out every weekend that was out here, but I came occasionally, you come out and there'd be you work all day, make a little bit of progress, and come back a couple weeks later, and lo and behold, there's more block laid. This thing rose out like phoenix out of the ground every week. Every time I came out, it was a little bit bigger, and I never really questioned whether this was going to be successful or not. But somehow Dave just kept the things going. The roster of characters that worked on this was really impressive. I mean, I met a lot of other young people in the process. But the cast of characters gradually changed. Kids were involved for a while, then they'd grow a little older, get involved in other activities, and so the whole character would change. But Dave was a real constant in this process, and always managed to get another cohort of young people to come on out and work. You saw a lot of the old photographs, and Dave and some of the others are really good about remembering who's who, and it's great fun to look at these old pictures and see who's who and try to identify them and think about where they've been since the time they worked on the observatory. Most are identifiable, some are still lost in the web of old memories, but it's really great fun to do that. Dave was really credited with being a mentor for me and many other people, as you've already heard. But I also have to acknowledge all the other adults in the team that came out and contributed their special skills, whether that's plumbing, electrical, mechanical, machinists, of course, working on the telescope of the building and other aspects. We can trust that everybody has got some good memories of that time. Some of you could probably involved for a longer period of time and remember more specifics. Dave already hinted about my marriage, but I want to recall that one special night. When I went to college, I didn't really get to Calvin. I really didn't get a chance to do much more with the observatory, so I missed out on some of the early years. But somewhere around late '69 and '70, when the observatory was now somewhat functional before the dedication, I brought my girlfriend at the time to the observatory one night and showed her a few things like some galaxies and star clusters, and somehow that really impressed her. And sure enough, in late 1970, in August, we got married. So this summer celebrates our 50+1, just like the celebration here of our life. And that was a really turning point for me, and the end of that decade and the start of another one. And so I'll now turn it over to the 1970s to see what you can hear. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I forgot that you missed the dedication, didn't you? Because you were otherwise preoccupied getting married. Or away, getting ready to get married. Marc Boyd, I could go on all day about this guy. He's been one of my closest friends since he was about 15 years old, and he was a stalwart in the work crews from about the time of the dedication of the observatory in 1970 to today. He comes back occasionally to see progress. He's gone on to wonderful things since he was a leader in the junior astronomy group at a young age. He received his advanced schooling at Michigan State University, and then in 1979 became a chemical engineer with Shell Oil in New Orleans for a while. He returned to Grand Rapids in 1981, married his childhood sweetheart, Anita, and also went to work for Amway Corporation. He also served at least one term, maybe more, as president of the GRAAA during that period. He got his big break in 1964 when he and Anita moved to Minneapolis with young son Eric in tow by that time, one of 3 children he ended up with. And he moved up quickly through the ranks of General Mills, which comes as absolutely no surprise to me or anybody who knows Marc. Then it was on to Atlanta, where I think he was involved as a manager or assistant manager of a Cheerios factory, your favorite breakfast cereal, of course. And then back to Minneapolis after another promotion. And he ended his career in 2015 as a research and development director at General Mills. Despite this impressive resume, Marc has always been and continues to be one of the most inherently modest people I know. He did let it slip one time that one of his greatest challenges and triumphs was being leader of the team that developed gluten-free Cheerios. There you go. Now, we've been all over the world together. We've been down to Clouds in Texas at the Texas Star Party, Clouds in the Rocky Mountains at the Rocky Mountain Star Party, almost Clouds in 2017 at the Eclipse, and yet I still want to do stuff with this guy, even though he's a jinx. And I will tell you one real quick story. Oh, by the way, we also went to South America together, where we also saw a few clouds, as I recall, a lot more than we expected. About a decade ago, we were having breakfast while on a ski trip to Utah. And as we were chatting, Marc picked up a Daneman yogurt cup, and he started twiddling around in his hand. And I asked what that was all about. He says, oh, well, matter of factly, I was part of the team that developed this, that invented it, the cup. Not the yogurt, but the cup. Yogurt was invented by some cow, I think. Anyhow, that's enough. This guy has a contagious enthusiasm. It's just always a delight to be around him. My dear friend, Marc Boyd.
Thank you, David. It is wonderful to be here in front of GRAAA and all our friends. It is a fabulous treat for me to come back on occasion. And I'm going to talk about the 70s. And 70s were a very special time for this observatory. But I can't really talk about the 70s unless you put it into a little bit of historical perspective. Because growing up as kind of a midstream baby boomer, as many of you are, we were saturated with Mercury and Gemini and Apollo spacecraft during that time. It was on TV, and we were excited by the launches. And so I think there was a whole generation evolving at that time that was super excited about space. And it was, I think, a wonderful, thoughtful, strategic move for the forefathers of this observatory, the club members at the time, and the officers to think about building an observatory. Because I think it timed almost perfectly with the needs of a growing group of folks that really wanted to dig deeper into space and understand things more. So, I just think about the Veen Observatory as a dream. I think it fulfilled a part of our lives at that time that started earlier as kids, and usually started with a 4995 telescope from some convenience, some store someplace. Y'all know the one I'm talking about, that 60 millimeter diameter refractor. And you were out as a kid in the backyard trying to learn how to use this thing, and it was challenging in every way. And I had one of those, and it didn't even have a star diagonal. So the best you could do is kind of be down on your knees in the mosquito-filled grass, trying to figure out a glimpse of a star cluster or a planet. And then when you first discover that aha moment, which I think many of you would share with me, the rings of Saturn, right? That struck you, how is this possible? I'm seeing this with my eyes. It was like a discovery for each one of us individually that I think led to a lifelong interest. And I must also say that mentors and teachers play an incredible role in our society. David, I'd like to thank you for being a great mentor to me throughout my life. But I think before I owned that little white telescope, there was only the slightest nudge from my 5th grade teacher that said, Marc, why don't you figure out the distance to the planets and present that to our class? So that's a simple little assignment, you would think. But sometimes all it takes for a 10-year-old is to have a little nudge in the right direction, right? That can unfold and grow in interest and make lifelong interest. And so that's what happened to me, Mr. Ellis. In fact, I named my second child's middle name as Ellis after this teacher. But it's so important to have institutions like the Veen Observatory, like the Astronomy Club, that light little teeny fires in 10-year-olds. That's a critical feature in our society. And I think that the Astronomy Club, through the work of the GRAAA, the Junior Astronomy Club at that time, and the construction activities of this, created, I think, a new landscape for those who had common interests and wanted to pursue them. We found buddies, we found friends that had the same mindset, that reinforced our own interests, which were probably a little nerdy at the time, right? Before the nerdiness became a big deal. And I think so that extra commonality of interest fostered a great deal of interest for us all and led to probably life-changing and career-changing events. So it's only from the very smallest of nudges, I think, to lead us in all different directions to accomplish many things. But here comes the Veen Observatory in 1970 in its completion. And so here we are, having just used 60 millimeter little telescopes in our backyards, to suddenly having this great access to a 12.5-inch telescope. The Jeffrey Bohr telescope was a magnificent machine. It was no pansy scope. This thing was big, and it was a welded steel frame, and it sat on a fork mount that looked like it was designed from the 40s, like the Hale telescope or something. I mean, it had mass, and you could wrap it with your wrist, and it wouldn't vibrate like that clunky little wooden tripod in your refractor. I mean, it really presented an opportunity to explore the interest and just leapfrog everything we had at the time, and to share that experience together. I think it really captured a moment almost perfectly, and it really helped to have those mentors in the club, the Percy Hawkins, the Marins, all the mentors we had to really gestate those interests and to rise forward. So it was a brand new day, and that's why I still call it a dream. I can't believe it was 50 years ago when it first came on the scene. But it did a lot of good for a lot of people. I have to say that many of the skills and things we developed at the time, are kind of a lost art. The star hopping and all the skills you needed to run a telescope at that time. It just wasn't what we have today. And I think because of all the automation we have today, it actually was a spectacular thing because it drove you to learn skills and things that are bypassed today with all the modern electronics and all the go-to work. I mean, this was a telescope you had to grab by your hands, and you had to move it over there, and you had to search and find by, it was not a go-to telescope, and I think that made better astronomers of us all. So in some respects, there's some dying breed, examples of talent from that day that where we really had to learn how to star hop and dig around. But we also had in the 70s a tremendous collaboration and community. And in the 70s, we had several beautiful solar eclipse trips together as a community. And, it was, once we got through some of that, we also had the kind of the wide open field of astrophotography to pursue with that scope because it was so beautifully aligned and, it had the right equipment to guide it. I think astrophotography as a hobby today is just flourishing like crazy. If you go to YouTube and watch what's happening, I mean, it's everywhere. A lot of people doing it, but it's an entirely different act today than it was then. Then it was hard to do, even with the right equipment. The time exposures with that Bohr telescope had to be so accurately guided. And in every moment, you're watching the crosshairs of a little furry blur in the eyepiece that tended to wander a little bit, and you had to be right on top of it with the controls, and it was a difficult thing to do. I'll never forget tonight, Dave and I went to the observatory, and we went because it was spectacularly dark that night. It was spectacularly dry air. And the reason it was is because it was 12 degrees below zero. But we thought this would be a magnificent time to capture the best possible photograph. And so we lined up in our normal manner, but it was a little colder, and I'm not sure we were thinking as clearly as we normally did because the cold was penetrating the clothes already. And Dave started out the night, I forget which object it was, but after his 15, 20 minutes of guiding, we discovered that it really had never been set on bulb. It was set on 1/30th of a second of exposure. So he missed that opportunity, and my time was next. And I forget the object at the time, but we spent another 15, 20 minutes carefully guiding at 12 below, shaking, make sure we don't lose it. And then we advanced the film shortly thereafter, and the film just cracked. You could hear it cracking inside the camera. So there were some real practical lessons in the day about how to do astrophotography. And of course, it wasn't just at the telescope itself. No, the bigger part of this was actually the processing of the film and the pictures. And I think we all lost about 5 years of our livelihood sniffing the chemicals of the developer and the stop bath and the fixer and all that stuff. It was like, and we all learned techniques about how to push film speeds, the likes of which you don't even think about today. Digital just gives you this novel capability to run it at any speed you want, but then we had to kind of like develop it for extra time, Tri-X, and we had to push it to 1600, and then we did a group order of 103 AF, the special astrophotography emulsion, and we all shared that and tried astrophotography with that. So we were developing skills, and a lot of beautiful pictures were taken in that time. It was like a whole different era from what we face today. But it was a wonderful time nonetheless, and a difficult time in some cases. But the beauty of it was we did it as a community, and it was. I was talking a little earlier with some of the folks about how the observatory at that time actually was. It was so busy we had to divide the night into 2 sections, and you could only reserve so many sections per month. And it was always a challenge to try to get to the museum and get your name on that list to observe and photograph. And it was a lot of fun. And it was also spectacular because as a young person, even before we had driver's license, we could get our parents to drop us off, and we'd just stay all night, and another parent would pick us up in the morning. So it was a wonderful time. I think still today, probably the most important thing about this observatory and this club is the outreach and trying to reach the community and trying to inspire children. And I would just offer that thought in closing here that all it sometimes takes, like my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Ellis, took, just a little nudge to create a lifelong interest in a child. And so I'd encourage everyone to think about the open nights and to encourage families and the youngest families to reach out. That is your mission more than anything now, is that we need more than ever 10-year-old boys and girls reaching into space and with the curiosity and the inspiration derived from the observatory. So that's in closing. Thank you very much.
I hope Jack McCarthy was listening because Marc and Jack are close friends also. I'm sure Jack McCarthy is listening because he's our director of outreach at the present time, and he shares Marc's contagious enthusiasm. It's just wonderful to be able to collaborate with people like this who inspire. They really do. So we now turn to what we call the crazy 90s. And who better to talk about the crazy 90s than one of the crazier people we've ever had in GRAAA? Another person who just effuses enthusiasm for the universe and for all that it entails, and that would be Andy Harwood. He started this is a nice lead in here because he told me in giving me the bio information that he first got turned on to astronomy at a visitor's night at the Veen Observatory. It was a Mars night, so that was one of the close oppositions of Mars, and it was in 1988. So if I'm doing my math right, you've seen now 3 close approaches of Mars, right? If they come every 15 years. I hate to tell you this, but I got about 3 more on you. And he joined the AAA. That visit led to joining the AAA, became a standout in the organization, and was also one of the people who, whenever we had a task to be done, we could ask Andy, and he would pitch right in with the greatest of enthusiasm. We recognized that enthusiasm when in 1993, Andy was given the very prestigious Thomas Strack Award for Excellence in Amateur Astronomy. That is, to this day, a very prestigious award that is only given to a very select number of exceptional people. He was also an astrophotographer, and you would have appreciated what Marc said about using film, because that was when digital was starting to come in and be pretty strong stuff. And Andy was a proponent for the purism of photography, and even got in a big debate over the subject at one point, as I recall. And are you still using film, Andy?
Oh gosh, no.
Oh, okay. You got to find film. Where do you find it these days? Yeah.
I have no idea.
The logo on our the GRAAA logo, he had part in redesigning and updating that. So that's another one of his many contributions, because the guy has a lot of graphics chops. And he moved to Minneapolis in 2005, and he got married, and now he's got 3 kids, and they're all here tonight. They're scattered about and about ready to hear their papa talk. So he says that he reports that he's still into astronomy. He recently built a pandemic special 18-inch Dobsonian himself, and does astrophotography with digital whenever he can. He made a special effort to fly across Lake Michigan for a whirlwind stop with his family to be with us tonight. Andrew Harwood.
I was trying to figure out why on earth, of all the people who were around here in the 90s, you guys would want me to talk. And I guess it's because I'm crazy. I was one of the craziest. Now I know. I was thinking it was just a way for Dave to get us all to come over here and bring my family. So we made a whirlwind trip over here. We flew in today and we're flying out tomorrow. And, I was... Initially, when I saw this event happening, I was like, should I go, should I not go? And then I started to think, I should really go. And then I started to think, well, is it just going to be me or is it going to be the kids? And my wife, Sherilyn, and I said, you know what? I'm going to bring all of them. I'm going to bring the kids here and the reason for that is because I want them to have some glimmer of how special this whole thing is. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I love this observatory. I love all of you. I love this community. This is such an absolutely special thing. And I don't know if this evening or this experience or getting to see the observatory for them is really going to give them that, because of course they didn't have this experience. But if there's one thing I can use these few minutes to convey here, it's just how magical and special this whole thing is. And we will get to the 90s, but just to put it in perspective, I'm a member of the Minnesota Astronomical Society. It's a wonderful group. It's a wonderful group of people. We have 3 observatories and 2 observing sites that we use. We have a 10-inch refractor, TMB. We have an 8-inch refractor. We have all this stuff, and they're wonderful people. And I don't mean to say anything against the Minnesota Astronomical Society. However, I can tell you for a fact, and there's outreach there, there's good outreach, but we do not have a junior group like anything like this. We don't have this kind of outreach. We have public nights, but I just don't think this is just such a special thing from the 1960s and 70s and on up to today, and it's still going. And I just hope that we can push this thing forward with all of our experiences, whether it was in building the observatory or me coming in the 90s and getting this glimmer of what's possible to bring astronomy to it's like that glimmer with all you need is just this little thing, just a bit of attention to how can we take this. It's such a strange thing, astronomy, because it's all there, right? I mean, astronomy is just, it should be easily accessible. It's not like you need to really travel somewhere, or unless you're seeing an eclipse, or have some special access to something. The sky is just there. But this is a really hard thing to get into. It's really very, there's these cheap little telescopes that you can still get from Walmart or whatever, and they don't work very well. And so I think a lot of people, maybe they get their kids a telescope for Christmas and it doesn't work very well. And then it's like, I couldn't really see anything with it. I don't really know what to do. And so you need an entry point into this. And if you've got a few people who care and they want to do public nights and they want to take young people under their wing and just or older anybody who wants to get into it, any age, and just here's how to use a telescope. Here's how to buy your first telescope without spending $10,000. This is really, really important stuff. So where I got into it was, yes, and I had a realization about this today that I had never thought about, involving Dave DeBruyn. So I did come out for the first time. My parents took me out here to the observatory for a Mars night, 1988. The first person I ever met in astronomy was Gary Ross. I remember him clear as a bell in the East Dome. Patris Fi Spiritus Sancti, Gary Ross. If you meet Gary Ross one time, you will never forget him. He was running the East Dome that night. I'll never forget it. But I had a realization. Where did my parents hear about this? How did they know about the Veen Observatory? How did they know about Mars nights? How did we get there? I am pretty sure, although I can't prove this, but we could probably look it up. There was probably a column in the Grand Rapids Press, and it was probably written by Dave DeBruyn about Mars. And they probably saw it and said, "Hey, Andy, why don't we go find this observatory and go out there and see what's going on with this?" I think that's pretty cool. I never thought of that until today, how my parents figured that out. So what was going on in the 90s? It was, just to piggyback on everything you said, Marc, it was a wonderful, wonderful community of people. And astronomy was so different then, amateur astronomy. Some similarities to today, but here's an interesting thing I was thinking about. Is I was building a telescope most of last year. I thought about March of last year that I might be stuck inside. Maybe I needed something to do. Maybe I needed to be in my garage building a telescope so I wasn't out spreading the virus or something. So what am I going to do? So I've always wanted to build a big Dobsonian. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the time before. And so I decided I was going to do it. I would build an 18-inch. And I'm kind of a spreadsheet guy, so I started making a spreadsheet and I started adding the whole thing up. And I was looking at obsessions too. I was thinking I might buy one. And I did realize that I could actually probably buy a Dobsonian, a good one, for less than I could build it for, especially by the time I bought the tools. Now, this was not the case in the 90s. I do not believe it was the case. They were pretty expensive for the day. And telescope making was booming. I don't think telescope making is booming anymore. Maybe I'm wrong. But I remember you'd go to these star parties and people were making just bizarre things. I mean, sheaf spiegelers, and they were making their own refractors and carving things out of wood. And I know people are still doing that. But telescope making at the time was really huge. And I remember Jim Farish We made we made 7 6-inch mirrors. Mirror grinding was still big, so there were people grinding mirrors, there were people making telescopes. I don't know when the digital thing came in, Dave, but it wasn't in the 90s. I mean, maybe it was just starting, but astrophotography was lunacy. It was horrible. It was one of the most awful things I've ever done in my life. It was frustrating. It was cold. It was, and then you'd get the film back the next day, and you were just like, I wasted and I froze my butt off for that, and a bunch of blurry. You weren't sure if you were in focus. I mean, it was awful. So all of that was very interesting. But remember in the 90s too, there was kind of maybe it never went away, because in the 80s you had the shuttle program and all that stuff too. But the Hubble Space Telescope launched in, I believe, was it 1990? Someone probably knows better than I do. 91. And we also had the World Wide Web was getting started. So, you can kind of see the cultural thing that was going on. But that's just really what I want to impress, that this is not going on in every astronomy club around the country or the world. We have a very, very special thing here, and it's all of us put together, but it's also the dedication of, a few people who really put the time in to do public nights, make this an outreach thing, and get people to come out and get sucked into astronomy. There's magic here, absolutely. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody who built the observatory, who has put in all their time and effort, whether it's big contributions or just bringing out a telescope and helping out a little bit. Or running the parking lot. Sometimes I didn't even get to use Dave had me run in the parking lot. You got to do these things, so so thank you. And I could probably say a lot more, but, thank you so much for letting me come and give my 2 cents too. Okay.
Marc Steiner's around here somewhere. See, you're not the first person we picked on. Marc was the guy guiding your cars in tonight. He just naturally gravitates to wherever parking is, because he's our ace out there on public nights. One thing I'll add before I introduce our final speaker, because Jack's going to take over as soon as he's finished. I've stood under the shadow of the moon with all 4 of these people. And Andy, I think you get the record. Yes, because 1991, and then you were on the ship in 98 too, weren't you? And then in 2017. So that adds up to 3 times. I was with Tom in 2017, with Marc in 72, 73, and 2017. So that's 3 for you. And Jake finally in 2017. And Jake was seeing his very first total solar eclipse. After becoming a world-renowned physicist, he finally decided he wanted to see a solar eclipse. Well, I wouldn't give Jake any time to talk if I were to tell you everything. So I'll be really, really quite quick and to the point. This guy just burst on the scene at about the time of our 30th anniversary, which was in 2000. He was even a speaker at age 16 at that particular event. He went on to finish up high school at Forest Hills Northern, where he was taking advanced classes at Calvin College, I believe, while at the same time doing sky shows at the planetarium. And then for recreation and enrichment, he produced laser light shows, Pink Floyd laser light shows. So, and Emily knows all about that and Jack, because they see Jake's credit when the credits come up for the current Pink Floyd light show, because he consulted in that project. Came all the way back from wherever he was traveling around the world to help produce the latest light show at the planetarium. So that shows you just how versatile this guy is. Upon graduation from Forest Hills, Jake received the prestigious Roger B. Chaffee Scholarship, and he, like Andy, also is a recipient of the Thomas Strack Award for Excellence in Amateur Astronomy. He was on to the University of Michigan, where he completed an undergraduate degree in a record 2 years, I think, something like that. Then he was named a Marshall Scholar, spending a couple years at Cambridge in England before returning to the United States to complete his PhD at Princeton University, where he also had an affiliation with the famous Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton. I'm getting breathless. Then it was on to postgraduate work in particle physics as a junior fellow at Harvard, where I had a memorable experience, probably a decade or so ago now, of actually spending some time with Jake. It was just an amazing of several days where I was at Harvard following him around on some of the things he does, feeling like the most important person in the world at the time. Following Harvard, he went on to Denmark as part of the prestigious Niels Bohr Institute for Advanced Studies, while also maintaining his affiliation with fellow scientists in the US at Princeton. He came back to the US in 2019, and that's where everything started to happen, starting with COVID, that put a complete sudden change into what Jake anticipated doing. But he jumped right in, adapted to Zoom, kept on doing his affiliations with people around the world, taught classes at Penn State University by Zoom and telecommunication. And then he decided to get married, and now he's got 3 kids. So this guy is really a busy boy, including twins who were just born in April, I believe, later part of April? May. Okay, and I could go on and on and on, but I want to give Jake some time to talk. When asked to speak today, he quickly accepted, felt honored to do it, and I knew that's exactly how he would respond. Also, he happens to be part of a very close-knit family, and they're all here tonight. I think that really says something. Dr. Jacob Bourjaily.
Thank you for this great honor and privilege. I feel incredibly privileged to know you and to have the observatory and the Astronomy Association in my life. Like many people here, I remember vividly the first time I looked through a telescope. It was at the Veen, it was the old Hawkins, and I can't remember though if it was Jupiter or Saturn, probably saw them both that night, but I was just absolutely hooked, and I fell hard. In preparation for tonight, I was looking back over some of my old files on my computer, and in a letter that I wrote to the board requesting a key, I documented my trajectory, and it was in 14, when I was 14 years old in November, became a member, 23 years ago. I somehow got training. Dave took me up and trained me on the old Jeffrey Bohr telescope, and I had permission to use the observatory alone by January, and I was a member of the board as a junior representative in March. So I fell real hard. And it was an amazing time. I'm incredibly grateful for that. The time I was a junior member was a very transitional time for the club in a lot of amazing and great ways. And I'm really, really grateful to have seen both sides, to have been trained on, I'm virtually certain the first astrophotograph I ever took was on the Jeffrey Bohr using slide film. And I eventually moved up to the Takahashi and the East Dome. The first board meeting I ever went to was, I also remember was approving the rebuilding of the Hawkins telescope, which was done so beautifully, and it's still one of my favorite telescopes. My wife of the last year, she's only been to Grand Rapids once, but I definitely took her up to the observatory and we looked through the telescopes. It's always been an extremely important place in my life, and how many kids well, in this room, a lot of people, but how many kids in the world get to have that kind of outlet where if you are excited about something that you can go? And I mean, I remember shortly after I had my driver's license, maybe even before I had my driver's license, I remember driving up in the mornings before school started when the scopes were available and taking pictures, almost falling asleep, and always being quite out of season from all the other people taking pictures. And I met so many incredible people who shaped my life and continue to shape my life. Dave DeBruyn is a mentor beyond comparison. I've never met anybody who's influenced as many people in such a positive way, and certainly for me. And he certainly hooked me. Within a few months, probably after that, I'm not sure when I started working at the museum, but it was certainly before I could get paid for it. And it was being able to go out to the hill on a night, and I, like many people here, did flashlight duty down at the bottom of the parking lot. And my Eagle Scout project was to build the lights to light the path so that we didn't have to shuttle those flashlights back and forth. But as I was saying, this time period, right around 2000, around the 30th anniversary, was quite a transitional time. I mean, the Jeffrey Bohr was moved, and the new Jeffrey Bohr was put in and dedicated, and it was a great honor to be part of that and to use that telescope. The robotic telescope went into the East Dome. The Hawkins was upgraded beyond imagination to the beautiful telescope that it is today. And digital photography started coming about. I only took a couple digital photographs, and I remember it being really complicated. And I'm pretty sure that Andy must have been on the right side of that argument at the time. But and now all the scopes are much, even more impressive, and this resource is it's so important to me, it's important to my family, and it's important to everyone here. It's a great honor to be here and to reflect on that, my intense relationship for a few years, and my continued relationship since. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. No matter whether you helped us build the observatory back in the 1960s or whether you just joined the club a few months ago and maybe have just spent a night out at the observatory, I think we all understand or will understand shortly just how special of a place that is for many of us and many of us to come. All of us have stories, special things that happened. I have a lot. Just one I'm going to share tonight. And this is fairly contemporary. It happened probably about, I'd say maybe 5 years ago. And I do a lot of the public nights out there. And it was back before we had the golf cart that we have now to transport people up. So I was up at the top of the hill, and I was a greeter. And we had a car come up, and I remember pulling up, and there was this very elderly woman that got out of the back seat, and her daughter got out of the front seat and helped her a little bit. And we were talking as the gentleman was parking the car. And, we do your usual stuff, well, welcome, have you been here before? Do you live close to the observatory? All those kinds of things. How'd you hear about us? And I happened to ask, what are you looking forward to seeing tonight? And for the first time, the elderly person spoke up, and she just perked up, and she says, "I want to see Jupiter. Are we gonna be able to see the planet Jupiter tonight?" I said, well, yeah. We're in luck here, and I pointed where Jupiter was up in the night sky, and I said, there's 3 or 4 telescopes that already are looking at Jupiter, and I said, have you seen it before? And she says, I'm 92 years old, and I can remember when I was a young person, maybe 6, 7. I can remember my parents taking me to a small little park and looking through a small telescope, and I can remember seeing Jupiter, and I can remember seeing 2 moons on one side and 2 moons on the other side. And she said, that memory has stuck with me forever. And she says, I have never had a chance to see Jupiter since that time. And I said, well, that's great. I said, well, you've got all tonight. Jupiter's going to be in the night sky for several months. In fact, it's going to be in the night sky and the evening sky for several years. And she looked at me and she said, no. She said, this will be the last time that I see Jupiter. And I had sort of this questioning look on my face, and she said, I'm going to be legally blind shortly, and I have macular degeneration, I think it was. And she said, so no, this is going to be my last time. And, boy, that stayed with me. And, all of us have had the chance to show Jupiter or Saturn or the moon to somebody for the first time. And they get the wow, and oh my gosh, is that real? And so it was a unique experience for me. I got a chance to help somebody see Jupiter for the last time. Well, we have a lot of public nights. You've heard many of the speakers talk about them. I've kept track over the last 5 years. I kept track of how many we have visit us out on public nights as well as group visits. We usually have about 25 groups that come out to the observatory. And over a 5-year period, from 2016 through the year 2020, we've had 8,859 people that have been out and enjoyed our observatory that we've hosted. And so after I looked at that, yeah, that's pretty neat, isn't it? So after I got that number, I said, gosh, I got to try to do my best to figure out, what about the previous 45 years, So, well, nobody kept track. I went back and did some research. We typically had fewer public nights historically than what we do now, and we typically had a little bit smaller crowd than what we average now. Although we also had the largest public night we've ever had, and it was either in 1999 or 2001. It was a Mars opposition. And I wasn't there, and I'm thankful I wasn't, because we had over 1,000 people, 1,000 people show up on the hill that night. So I can't imagine that. Maybe some of you folks were there for that, but so we certainly have had some great times on the hill, and I'd like to turn it over here and introduce somebody, Tom Good. And as Tom is making his way up here, just tell you a little bit about Tom. He's retired now, but he had a very illustrious career with the federal government and the Department of Labor. Tom has been a member, he thinks, since 2009 is his best guess. Tom is on the board of directors and has helped us in a number of very key committees. And one thing I want you to listen to here, tell me after you listen to Tom a little bit whether you recognize his voice. Tell me if you recognize his voice, because Tom spends a lot of nights out at the Veen helping us on public nights, but even when Tom's not there, we hear Tom talking. And I don't know if Fran's in the audience or not, but Fran is our person that sells merchandise inside the building, and she hears Tom talk an awful lot. In case you haven't figured it out, Tom is the current narrator of the most recent version of the A Night on Kissing Rock Hill. So, the voice of the Veen, I'll introduce Tom Good. Tom?
Do you envy me following Marc, Tom, Andrew, and Jacob? I'll tell you what it feels like. I feel like that tourist who's taking a selfie with Mount Rushmore in the background. I'm a relative newcomer both to the club and really to astronomy. And I'm going to stick pretty closely to my script out of respect for your time and to make sure that I don't miss anything. So I'm going to start with a little bit of personal history. Prior to the fall of 2008, I was a binocular astronomer only. And I'd been that really since I was a kid. I knew that there was a local astronomy club, but I had never gotten off my butt to investigate it or to come out and check out the observatory. That all changed one night when I was riding my bike home late at night, and I ran into Mike Murphy in our neighborhood, who had set up his telescope, was doing some alignment work, and it was a personal invitation from Mike, who said, "You really ought to think about joining the club." So I followed Mike out to a public night, and I joined, and I've been a member ever since, and an active member, particularly active with the public nights. I'll always be grateful to Mike for that, and recently I had a chance to, a few years ago, I had a chance to pay it forward. I invited my friend, Chris Miller, to join the club. You're welcome. In all honesty, I'm not the most knowledgeable or tech-savvy member of the association. I've not yet done any imaging, but thanks to the generosity and the deep knowledge of the other members, every time I go to the Hill, whether it's for a public night or when I'm out there, well, I go out there by myself, I learn something. And that's something unique about this club, is that the people are so generous with their knowledge. I've been mostly what we call a sidewalk astronomer. That is, I enjoy helping people look through a telescope, especially if I can be there when it happens for the first time, and maybe changes forever the way they see the sky. I like helping people see the sky in 3 dimensions. Before I joined, the people that I shared that with were mostly innocent passersby in some light-polluted neighborhood of Grand Rapids. Now, because I've become a regular at the public nights, sometimes in the parking lot, sometimes on the Hill, I don't have to go on the prowl or talk hesitant people into looking through an eyepiece. Here, there are already astro-curious folks who are lining up to look through the Bohr or the Hawkins scopes, or my personal scope when I've set up on the lawn. How satisfying, you all know how satisfying it is to hear those oohs and ahs when people see those OMG objects like Saturn or the Terminator on the moon or the moons of Jupiter or a globular cluster. Our public nights are still the nights when the James C. Veen Observatory really shines. By the time they have walked up the driveway and are in line for their first look, visitors have already encountered 2 or 3 members. They've been welcomed. We've helped them park their cars. We've relieved them of a few nominal dollars for a fee. And we've pointed them where to go and given them some idea what lies in store for them for the rest of the night. As they approach, they see the white facade of the building, sometimes in the fading twilight. They see the open west dome with a red glow and maybe some excited voices coming from within. They often stop first at the Hawkins for their first eyeful of lunar craters, or the rings of Saturn, or Jupiter and its Galilean moons. Then it's inside for a brilliantly edited, scored, and narrated video presentation of a night on Kissing Rock Hill, while they wait their turn up in the West Dome for a look through the Jeffrey Bohr scope. If it's early in the evening, they may see the same bright object that they saw just with the Hawkins, but then there's something to learn there too, seeing the same object through a different scope, through a different instrument. Then it's out on the lawn to look through the personal scopes of a handful of club members, volunteers who have generously set aside an evening to help people. At that point, if their appetite has been whetted enough, they may start the cycle all over again and to take advantage of the new objects that have come into view through the darkening sky or the Earth's rotation. We have an active public and visitor services committee. They're charged with planning, staffing, evaluating, and continuously improving the public night experience at our outreach events. We provide training for members on how to use the observatory scopes. We accommodate private groups and visits and tours, and that's scout troops, church groups, middle school, high school, every type of group you can imagine. And as mentioned before, we have a golf cart and walkie-talkies that have improved the public night experience, especially for people who have mobility challenges. Will Rogers once advised, buy land. They ain't making any more of the stuff. Well, we've certainly taken that advice to heart. The observatory has gone from being a tenant to being a fully invested neighbor on Kissing Rock Road. In the same generosity of spirit that led Evelyn and Jim Marin to lease their land and on a long-term basis to the association on extremely favorable terms, in 2017, they concluded with us the sale of 12.5 acres of land that encompasses the building, the surrounding grounds, the access road, and the parking areas. Now, added to that are nearly 4 acres to the north of the building, purchased thanks to an anonymous donor whose identity has been the worst kept secret in the history of anonymity. Now that we are not merely occupants, but owner stewards of the land, we have a responsibility to maximize the potential of that land, and that work has already begun. Among many other Herculean efforts by Chris Miller, the lower parking lot has been expanded by 8,000 square feet to accommodate the large crowds that come out, and he has kept Burnham Wood from coming to Dunsinane. He's actually felled enough trees to lower the leafy horizon appreciably so that we can see some of the southern sky objects that were becoming obscured. So what can we draw from this retrospective and this look back that we've had so far this evening? Three things, I think. Three things I think should pass through the minds and the hearts of every member as we round that last bend and the towers and the building come into view. First, a sense of gratitude to the people who had the vision and the determination to make that marvelous, improbable facility a reality. Then, a feeling of pride that comes from being associated with such a project, even for those of us who came along long after the last brick was mortared into place. Finally, and most importantly, a sense of responsibility to carry on and to preserve and extend that vision by participating in the ongoing work of the club and its mission to promote community interest in and participation in astronomy through outreach, education, and research. Let's continue to be mindful of our past while we look always forward to the future. Thank you.
Well done, well done. I realized after I sat down I didn't finish my my thought about the numbers of people that have visited the observatory. So for 5 years, I counted 8,859. Went back and did the best calculation I could, very conservatively, I feel. And I can very comfortably say tonight that over the 50 years, I did the estimation for 45 years, and I took my numbers for the last five. We have easily hosted anywhere between 55 and 60,000 people out at the observatory over our 50-year history. Now that is really something. That really is. So again, thank you, Tom. I did a group visit just this past Tuesday, and it was a group from Belleville, Michigan, which is way down by Detroit, and they came up, and as we were waiting for some of the other folks in the group, there was a car that drove up, and I sort of my fashion. I learned it from Jim Farish. You sort of walk out there and you greet the folks that are part of the group visit, and you welcome them. Well, as it turned out, there were a couple members that popped out of the car, and I talked with them a bit, and I said, gosh, sorry, folks, but this group has the telescopes reserved. And they said, oh, no worries. We're not here to look through the telescopes. We're here to walk some trails. I thought, oh, okay. And it made me think that about a week before that, I'd been up midday at the observatory to pick something up, and I noticed there was a car. Nobody was in it. That was sitting there. And when I finished and came out, there was two couples that were walking up from the south pathway. And I went over and chatted with them, and they ended up telling me that they try to come out, if not once a week, at least once every couple of weeks. And I guess at that point, it really dawned on me that we are now operating a multi-use facility. It is not just an observatory. Certainly, that's a key part of it that we use at the night to share our passion with astronomy. But it is getting used in the daytime as well. And I'd like you to indulge me here just a minute, and I'd like to tell you the story that I learned about how the David L. DeBruyn pathways at Veen came about. And Dave told me some of this. I'm adding a few things of my own. But Dave was very candid. He said, it wasn't my idea. He said, well, originally it wasn't my idea. He says, it was Chris Miller's idea. And Dave explained that, Chris is, a couple of us have mentioned it, is out there every Saturday just busting, getting stuff done, working on beautifying the observatory grounds. And shortly after, I think we purchased the property from the Marins, that Chris was out there, just working like crazy, and Dave was out there watching him. And we've seen that before. And anyway, Chris, I guess, just said, we got a long way to go, but, when this is done, wouldn't it be nice to just have sort of a path for people to walk in and spend some time in the woods? And so there was a little kernel, I think, that was planted in Dave's head there about, a possibility. The second thing that I think gets us to the pathways that we now have today, we all know that Dave has just a tremendous passion for astronomy. I mean, the man has been around for 50 years and has, been a leader in this organization. I would say, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but right after the generosity of the Marins, and we wouldn't have the observatory if it wasn't for them, I would also add that we wouldn't have the observatory built if it wasn't for Dave. And Dave's work down at the Roger B. Chaffee Planetarium, I mean, the man has a passion for astronomy and teaching astronomy. But, some of us know this, but maybe a lot don't. Dave has a lot of passions. I mean, one of them is for that young lady in the back there in the yellow coat, Donna. Donna's a long-term friend of Dave's, and certainly Dave has a passion for her. Dave has a passion for classical music. And we all, many of us know that. Some more, not at our choice, but Dave has a passion for firefighting. Where's this astronomy and classical music? Dave was an ex-firefighter. He was a firefighter for Cascade Township for a number of years. Has done some really neat work of bringing back some old fire equipment for a museum and display it for the Grand Rapids Fire Department. So he's passionate about that. Dave's passionate about the University of Michigan. He graduated from there, and some of you may know this. Many I don't think do, but there's a scholarship in Dave's name at the University of Michigan for folks that are moving towards education and planetarium science at the school. But I think, it's a tough one for me to say, but Dave's passion of astronomy might only be matched equally or close anyway to his passion for nature. Dave loves the outdoors. I mean, in the wintertime, he's downhill skiing. Marc and I have done that, and other people have, Mike Kozak and others have done that. Dave goes out snowshoeing. In the summertime, he loves hiking, loves walking in the woods. He loves to go boating. Dave plays golf. Now, if you were listening closely, you would have noticed I didn't say Dave loves to play golf. He loves boating, he loves to hike, he loves to ski, but if he loves golf, and I play golf with Dave, boy, he has a weird way of showing it when we're on the course. But anyway, Dave enjoys the outdoors, and he truly enjoys nature. And I think it was the idea that Chris planted, his passion for nature, and then it was his leadership as president of the club when he worked with Jim and Evie to be successfully able to purchase the 12.5 acres for the observatory, and then worked very closely to help us get the additional 4 acres. And I think putting all of those things together really allowed Dave to formulate this idea of let's develop a trail system, a connected trail system at the observatory that people can use during the daytime and whenever they want. And so Dave put together, as Dave often does, a very detailed proposal. He brought it to the board of directors. Gary, you remember that. We talked about it. We listened to it. Dave offered to totally fund the project, both the development as well as the maintenance of it. And he wanted to have a small group of people to help him sort of pick the path and bounce some things off of. And the board had a couple of questions, and as normal, Dave had to go back and come back to us. But I think all of us ultimately on the board realized that with Dave's passion of astronomy and now knowing his passion of nature, it was only appropriate to for Dave's idea to develop these trail system and make it a reality, to name them after Dave. And so tonight I'm very proud to be able to say we have a wonderful pathway system at the observatory, and we decided at the board that it should be named in Dave's honor. So we have the David L. DeBruyn Pathway at the Veen. So Dave, would you come up and say a couple things?
Well, for this part of it, I do not have the book open, so I have no rehearsed comments, other than to say how deeply honored I am to have the pathway system be sort of a legacy. I'm glad to be still standing here at 80 years old, and I think maybe the reason why I'm doing so well is because I did what I loved most of my life. There are people that still come up to me and say, "Did you ever work for a living?" And I said, I can't rightly say that I did. There were very few days in all of those years that I worked at the Public Museum, which is another love of mine, where I didn't feel like getting up and getting at it. There were very, very few times when I would ever go up to the Veen Observatory when I didn't come away with something more than I had when I got there. It was time extremely well spent, even if it was laying blocks with a bunch of smart-aleck kids who I loved. And a couple of them are here tonight, and they know who they are. Or whether it was just being alone in the West Dome with maybe some night sounds, looking at some galaxy lying 7 or 8 billion light years out in space. Here I was on this little speck of dust called planet Earth, looking out at all of this magnificence and just feeling happy to be able to embrace it. So thank you to the GRAAA. Thank you to all of you, dear friends. Thank you for those of you who are filling this sanctuary at this beautiful country church on a night when I never thought this would happen, based on everything that was stacked against us. This was a very special thing that all of us that were involved in putting it together worked on, well, for a year, and then it fell through completely because we couldn't do it. And then we thought, well, we can do it even better next year. And then to think that we came within a hair's breadth of possibly losing everything this afternoon, and the fact that you all came through and are here tonight. I thank you very much for that effort and also for the honor. So it's getting late. We still have more things to do.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to just step aside here for I've got something off script I need to do.
Uh-oh.
So take your notebook.
Yeah, I'm going to need the notebook for the next part.
So, folks, Dave has no idea what I'm doing here, and I do. But I'm going to go off script here for a minute, and then, we have about 100 people here tonight celebrating the 50th anniversary of the James C. Veen Observatory, and that's great. But within this group, we have sort of a subgroup. We have a subset of the 100 people that are here celebrating. And that's a group of young people that, aren't so young anymore. But, all of us had a chance to grow up with this organization. And Marc and others have talked about it. Whether it was building the observatory or working out the observatory, whether it was helping at public nights, whether it was being a part of this great astronomy club, or whether it was working at the Roger B. Chaffee Planetarium. All of those things happened, and we learned an awful lot. Those were all many of us that were growing up. It was our formative years. We were teenagers. We were middle teens, late teens, early 20s. And, from those things, we learned a lot in life. But what happened is, as it always does, you spread out. People go to different places in the country, and, all of us have had successful jobs, successful careers, successful families, relationships. But, and I don't even know some of the kids that grew up in the later generations. I haven't even probably met them all. But there's one thing that we all had in common, and that was Dave DeBruyn. We had the good fortune to be able to work with Dave DeBruyn. And Dave taught us in a lot of ways. We all learned from his strong leadership. We learned from his thoughtfulness and his kindness. We learned how important those qualities are as you go out in life. We benefited from Dave's generosity, not only his time, but he helped financially many of us in our early years. And Dave instilled confidence in us. He taught us that we could do some things that we never thought we could do. Dave tried to teach us how to be frugal, because Dave is very frugal. Some people call it cheap, but and it worked for some of us it didn't. But for me, I guess I'll just say that probably the one thing that I benefited the most from, and I'm sure others did, was just his enthusiasm, was his passion, whatever it was he did. Whether it was the Chaffee Planetarium, developing a show, whether it was building the observatory, Dave was passionate. And, I guess I came away from that knowing that, or understanding that if I'm going to do something, I go all in. I don't leave anything on the table. I do it 100%. And that I learned from working with Dave as a very young person. One other thing I did here that I reached out to a bunch of you out there. I didn't catch up with everybody, but folks I had emails with, I sent a quick note out a couple days ago. I just said, hey, give me a couple words that you would use to describe Dave, or give me a comment that you want me to, that you'd like to share. And, the good news is I really could read all of them. Weren't any that I couldn't read in public. But in all seriousness, I'm just going to read, and please, I accept my apologies in advance here that I'm not going to read your entire comments, because some folks wrote some very sincere but rather long stories. So I've just sort of picked and comments from everyone that submitted them. So I'm just going to read through these very quickly. Dave taught me how to be a lifelong learner. Dave dedicated his life to helping others and has shared his passion of astronomy and science with hundreds of young people. Dave is a real leader and a mentor. He was more than a teacher because he taught us to be productive individuals in our own lives. Dave gave off a feeling of enthusiasm that was just contagious for all of us that were around him. Here's a list of a number of things: caring, thoughtful of others, honest to the bone, and I have to say there's one here that I don't understand at all: memory like an elephant. I might disagree with that, but it was a comment. Fun-loving, gregarious, and this one I thought was really neat, everybody's dad. Kind-hearted, devoted. Dave dedicated his entire life to the service of others. Dave has always cared about his kids and has helped countless young people get a start in astronomy and in our own lives. When I think of the people who exemplify the word mentor, Dave is the first one that comes to my mind. I've got a couple of quotes from this one here. Dave's willingness to involve himself directly in the lives of myself and my friends allowed him to become a personal source of inspiration and drive for me and many others. You guys will really, I think, appreciate this. The quality of the planetarium show production at the Chaffee is something that I have yet to encounter anywhere else. Dave understands how to blend dramatic theater, music, and scientific take-home messages and masterfully choreograph those in multimedia productions. I will always, and the sentence goes on, and I will always be grateful for his willingness to permit his younger staff to occasionally take the lead in show productions. Because Dave is a very humble person, I am sure he underestimates just how important he has been in my life as well as dozens of other young people as we were growing up. And I'll end with this one. It's really a neat thing here, and I will spend my entire career trying to repay the debt of gratitude that I have for Dave DeBruyn and the opportunities that he gave me. So I want to invite Dave back up from Dave's kids and everybody here in the audience and just say thank you so much for everything you've done for us.
Well, this is a very rare occasion in which I'm totally speechless. Yes. No, this was totally unexpected, just totally unexpected. I kept looking at my watch saying, we're going to be running over, and I had no idea that this was in the program. And we do have one other surprise in the program yet, too. So I'm not going to go drone on, which I have been known to do. And again, just say how incredibly grateful I am for those nice words, those of you who penned them and took time to do that, and for all the rest of you that enrich my life so much just by being around you. You're just a class group of people, and that's a gift. Let's turn to let me turn the tables back on Jack, shall we? Because Jack and I have been friends since he was 14. And like Marc, we've traveled around to see eclipses together. We've been on ships, sailing around to follow the moon's shadow. And like Marc, too, there are very few people I have more respect for than Jack. And I'm so glad he's in AAA, or in GRAAA, and always has been. I think he has the longest continuous running membership of anybody in the room besides me and probably the Marin family. I may be mistaken about that, but even when he was in Cincinnati working for Meyer, for a time. He maintained his membership. And of course, with a career with Meyer as a vice president, it was a very time-consuming and demanding work. But every now and then, Jack would take solace and participate in a GRAAA activity. We'd see him, we'd maintain our contact, we'd exchange Christmas cards, and a few other things to let us know that we cared about each other. In fact, his career with Meyer goes all the way back to, I think, either high school or just afterward, when he was a security guard at the old Meyer Thrifty Acres at the corner of Kalamazoo and 28th Street. And then it was a very rapid rise through the organization. The time in Cincinnati when he was away, but came back in the early 90s to assume a vice presidency. He's worked in labor relations, security and safety, many other capacities with Meyer. So it's been quite a career with one organization for the most part through the whole thing. And when he retired here probably 8 or 9 years ago, he finally had the opportunity to really get active again in GRAAA. Always had that interest, as you could tell from his presentation here this evening. He has a passion for astronomy, he has a passion for the GRAAA, and also has the skills. He brings the skills to the table that we really, really need when it comes to some of the things that we as an organization want to accomplish. I'm very happy to say that during the time when I was president and we were doing the negotiations for the land acquisition, that Jack was one of the people I turned to first as someone who is very, very important to that endeavor. And he really, really, really brought professionalism and organization to the effort. And for that, I will be very thankful, because it was a slog. It was a lot of work that we had to go through, some delicate negotiations, very friendly negotiations, both with the Marin family and also with the Grand Rapids Public Museum, which is a partner in the operation of the observatory. That's very important. One thing that I will take a great deal of pride in, and I know there are some professional people from the museum who are here tonight, is that from the moment I walked in the door at the Chaffee Planetarium in 1964, one of the things I wanted to do was bring the planetarium and the GRAAA into a close collaborative relationship. And that has maintained over many, many years, and it was solidified as we did the land acquisition. They became basically a really legal partner with us in the operation of the observatory and in the perpetuity of the land that the observatory is located on. So that's a wonderful formal arrangement that took some doing, didn't it? But we were able to accomplish it, and that's great. Jack is the outreach person. He's the chairman of that committee. He is the guy that helps to fulfill our mission of taking astronomy to people everywhere. That is one of our most important functions. We all agree on that. And he's one of the people who is fundamental in making that happen. And you'll find him as a fixture at most of the public nights, where he meets and greets and shares enthusiasm as only he can. Turning now to the McCarthy family pavilion. Jack alluded to the fact that we are now almost like a park. We are a natural park. We have the pathways. We have a wonderful historic building. And we have some grandiose plans that Marc Daneman's going to tell you about in about 4 or 5 minutes. And Jack came to the board a while back and suggested that a park pavilion, an enclosure that we could use for picnics, for presentations, In fact, tonight we were supposed to be standing right where the pavilion was. That's where the speaker's rostrum was going to be for the presentation tonight. And you will see there, probably within a year, this wonderful park pavilion. There's a concept of it outside. If you haven't looked at that board yet about our wonderful plans, be sure on the way out to take a look at that, because it really does it does picture in your mind what this place could be in another 5 years or so. And Jack said that his family was prepared to underwrite the cost of that. He didn't ask that it be named after him or after the family, but we just felt that was probably just a logical step. And we, of course, accepted that generous offer, and that pavilion will be there. It's going to be a rugged structure that will not need a lot of maintenance. It will become a focal point for small presentations. Hey, Tom, you can tell stories. You can have your storytelling group out at the observatory, right? And our imagination is our limit when it comes to what this very special space would be like. We could have a camping area nearby. Dave Staskevich has had his scout groups out there a couple times, and we would like to have other civic groups and so on have outings there and campovers. Our much expanded upper lot, thanks to Chris Miller, is capable of having RVs. I don't know if they can get up the road, but we can accommodate them once they're up there. And as you can see, there's just sort of wonderful, wonderful things that can be done. Jack wanted me to mention a couple things about this. In his own words, I believe the pavilion will add to the overall ambience and character of an already special and unique place. My hope is that it becomes a focal point for outdoor activities, including picnicking, twilight talks, overnight campouts, celebrations, and a great place to just sit down, relax, and enjoy the outdoors. He went on to note that there have been 3 generations now of McCarthy family that have been able to enjoy the Veen, and this is one way to give back and say thank you. That's true. I know there are 3 generations because I remember Jack's charming parents. I remember them well, who way back in the day were doing their due diligence by keeping an eye on just what kind of geeky characters their 14-year-old son was hanging out with up there on this dark place called Kissing Rock Hill. Well, we're still geeky characters, and we still hang out on Kissing Rock Hill, but we also love the universe, and we love each other. Jack, all of your many friends here will long be thankful, not just for your generosity, but for your leadership and collaborative abilities, and for your commitment and perseverance. Most of all, I personally appreciate your warmth and good humor, especially the humor. You will never know when another one of Jack's clever one-liners is coming your way.
Thank you. We're running behind, so it's just my opportunity to give back to the organization that's meant so much to me and my parents and myself, my brothers, and now my son. So I'm glad to be able to give back to the organization. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Dave.
We finally arrived at our last speaker. Actually, we got started late, so we're only running over at this point. We expected an hour and a half, and that's about where we are. So indulge us for about another 20 minutes or so, if you will, please, because there's two very important things coming yet. And Marc knows that he's got to stick to his under 10 minutes. So I'm going to make this introduction extraordinarily brief. There isn't much to say. Well, there's plenty to say. There's plenty to say. Marc is a real professional, Marc Daneman. He's an attorney. He's been a city planner. That's kind of a nice resume to have when it comes to a planning committee chairperson. In fact, he was Cascade Township manager for a while. That was one of the many things he did during his long career. And now he's kind of semi-retired. And so in addition to being father to 2 kids, friend to my good friend Gary Beckstrom, who drove all the way over here from Flint, and also a grandfather now, right? You and Marc are grandchildren? With semi-retirement looming, Marc had to figure out what to do with himself. He never has enough to do. In fact, he's so impossible to keep up with, you never know what he's doing next. But he has plenty of time to be a visionary for GRAAA as chairperson of our sustainability committee. And he's the guy that came up with so many of the wonderful ideas that we have cooking to make Veen Observatory even a more special place than it already is. And so he's going to be the impetus behind the second leg of our capital campaign, which is a big one. Marc, come up and tell us all about it.
Thank you, Dave. I'm relatively new to the organization. I've only been a member for like 5 years. However, I did get my start from Dave back in the early '80s when I was with Cascade. He was with the fire department at the time, and occasionally we would chat about things because there was always issues at the fire department, and somehow I found out that he was interested, or he was involved with astronomy, and I told him about my background. As a kid, I was quite involved with astronomy. Had a nice telescope, had an great 8-inch telescope as a kid. I even ground my own telescope, ground my own mirror at one point, but sold it when I went to college, of course, because I couldn't keep it up. But when I came back to Cascade, he gave me the interest again, and I came out I brought my family out to the Veen to observe there. I even brought with Ken Bourjaily, Jake, out to the Veen, and I swear we were the ones that gave you the spirit for astronomy, Jake. So that was a Cub Scout group at the time, and Boy Scouts, we did the same. So anyways, I am now, and I've only been a member for 5 years. Finally, as Dave indicated, when I able to begin to slow down a little bit, it was my opportunity to get more involved. Started coming out, and last year was asked to join the board. Over the past several years, though, as Dave mentioned, we have a sustainability committee that has been involved with, growing the organization, thinking about the future. The sustainability committee was key, of course, in acquiring the Marin property and in acquiring the Randy Smith property to the north, which we did in 2018, and gives us what we have now, of course. And we are maybe going to look for the future, maybe some other properties, just to protect the integrity of the area. The committee's been involved for, as I said, for a number of years. However, over the past year, we really started to think about what do we want to do for the future. We've been doing that all along, but the thought was, can we really prioritize and come up with, specifically what we want to do? Projects that we have been involved with in terms of funding, getting funds. We were able to get funds for several of the projects. For example, the shed, the cart shed that's out there now next to the observatory. The cart itself was also an acquisition that we were able to get through a donation. We've refurbished the West Dome last year. This year we put in a new well. We've had financial assistance from a number of organizations, locally primarily. The LCTV fund out of Lowell assisted us in acquiring the Marin property, the golf cart, and the West Dome. We're doing the work on the West Dome. The Look Community Fund has been helpful for the golf cart shed. And the well, they gave us a grant last year for the well, and with COVID, of course, we had to wait till this year to put that well in, and it just went in a month ago. So, the Grand Rapids Community Fund assisted us in purchasing the Marin land as well as others. The Lowell Community Fund just awarded us $7,500 to finish our master planning process. Or at least to get our master planning process started, not finish it, because we're going to go in a couple stages, and I'll explain in a minute. but they have funded us so we can now hire an architect to help us, and a construction company, an architect or whatever, designer, to help us really finish designing the actual building that we're going to talk about in a minute. But our committee, just so you know, the committee is made up of board members. We got Jack, Tom, Chris, and Dave. We also have Angela and Randy Marin are the sort of the core members of the committee. We began last January, December or January, talking about what do we really want to do, thinking about this anniversary coming up that we are having now, and maybe trying to target the effort of what we want to do and be able to present it to you tonight, and hopefully begin a capital campaign later this fall on it. We are looking at actually two parts. The master planning process, the strategic planning process is really a two-part process. One, to look at the capital improvements, but also equally important is to look at the organizational development and operational activities of the organization. And we'll begin that second part this fall. So to give you an idea of what we're doing, and you saw on the board, I don't know, John, were you able to get that? We were able to, yeah, okay. We have come up with the designs for eventual development of the facility. As you can see here, this is a view actually looking east from the dome. So all you see is the West Dome. And we're hoping over the next 5 years that we can begin doing some significant capital improvements. The number one activity is going to be a new assembly building. The building, we're approximately 50 feet by 30 feet to sit behind the main building. And when we get that drawing back up, well, you'll be able to see that a little better. That building will be a classroom. It'll be attached to the existing Veen Observatory. It will hopefully be set back far enough so when you come up the drive, as you do, you'll see our historic. You'll see our building as it is. It won't disturb that. The building will hopefully be able to house about 50 people. It will provide us handicap bathrooms for all of you that know how our bathroom is now, that we now will have a real bathroom. It will be accessible from both the outside and the inside. We'll have a handicapped walkway that you can access it from there. There will also be, as you saw there, we're looking at having actually several other big elements. We're proposing that there will be a solar dome. In fact, there's been a commitment to finance for a solar dome to be put up. We have one of our scopes right now that we'll use for that. We're also looking at having at least three to start with, and some people have said maybe we need more. We'll have 3 roll-off smaller observatory buildings that people could rent or use for their purposes. If they want to keep their telescope there for a period of time, they'll be able to do that. It'll be a roll-off, and you'll see the sketch at the back also of how that's going to look. We're also looking at pathways to make it easier for people to access. We are well underway in making improvements to the grounds itself, to the parking lot, as Chris has been diligently working on, grading it and actually just graveling it recently, putting in a pathway along that a pathway to serve it. In addition to that, we're looking at stuff on the lower level, lower part of the grounds. We've got the trails that Dave talked about. We're going to have improved the parking area down there. We'd like to have a permanent greeting station down there, so we don't have to bring a table and a light that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, to help us take our concession with people there. And then we're also looking at other improvements. The building itself needs some improvement with regards to, blocks need to be improved, or we need to also, look at the insulation and painting and so on and so forth. Those are things that we'll plan on doing over the next several years. The second half of this planning project, which is going to be led by Jack, is to look at the organizational development. And that's where we're going to encourage, we want to encourage to bring the youth back. We want to bring more youth back into the program, as Dave was able to do, and many of you were able to be here at that time. We want to bring that back. We want to bring more diversity to this, to this effort. And we are looking at, of course, the kinds of events that were just spoken about, camping areas and so on and so forth. That's the kind of thing that we really want to encourage. New activities, more activities out there. So we're hoping over the next 50 years that we will be able to do all that and more. And we hope that many of you will be able to bring have your families come and have them become new members. We encourage all that. It's a dream for all of us. So please, we encourage all of you to get involved and help us out with doing this. Thank you.
So once again, we're going to go off script here very, very briefly, but for a very important reason. Dave mentioned a couple of the folks here are Thomas Strack, Excellence in Amateur Astronomy Award winners. And there's actually several of them in the audience tonight. I want to tell you... Okay, well, how about we have all the Thomas Strack Award winners just come on up to the stage, if you would, please. Jake and Dave and two Daves, another Dave and Andrew. So just a couple of quick things. Thanks, guys, for coming up. The first Strack Award was given, I think, in 1977 to both Dave DeRemo and Bill Sanders, if I remember right. Right, Dave? Yep. And the last one was given to Jake in 2002. So during that course of about 25 years, we've only given it out 10 times. I want to tell you briefly about Tom Strack. Tom was a friend of mine. He was a person that helped us build the observatory. But more than that, he was a person that mentored us in similar ways as Dave has. And Tom, like unfortunately other folks before him, left us way too early. Tom passed away when he was 27. So we recognize we have juniors doing tremendous work, and yet we didn't really have a way to recognize them, and we took that opportunity to honor Tom, and I want Dave to talk a little bit more about the award and what we're doing with it today.
Tom was one of those kids that helped us. We have a few pictures of him digging holes before we even started laying blocks. So he was one of the pioneers in that effort, and it was actually Jack and I think Mike Murphy, who was president around that time, and a number of others who we decided that we wanted to recognize young people that were exceptional in many different ways in contributing to the GRAAA. We had a set of criteria that I'm not going to go into, but they were fairly stringent. And we also wanted to make sure that this wasn't a popularity contest. It was something that was for a person who sincerely was interested in astronomy, first and foremost. Had to be an ardent amateur astronomer, but also contributed in significant ways to the Veen Observatory. And the award has unfortunately lay rather dormant over the time since Jake won it, because unfortunately young people haven't been as active in our group. There's been a dynamic shift, and I can't say that they're not interested in astronomy just as much. They just aren't joining clubs and contributing in the same way that these four gentlemen up here did during their particular time with us as kids. They're no longer kids, as you can see. Well, there's a key word we use today called reimagine. So we have reimagined informally. The board of directors has nothing to do with this. This is strictly ad hoc. We decided that maybe we should just start awarding this to an outstanding contributor to the club and not necessarily restrict it to a junior member. We said our colleagues would never object to that. So Jack and I just decided that we really need to do this because there is no question of who the recipient is. He's not only an ardent amateur astronomer, not only a imager, he's up there after spending all day on that blue tractor, driving it all over the place. Then he comes back at night to either help with a public night or to image with some of those other night owls up there. A very unique person, someone who we all love, even though we get into it with him from time to time. It is our great pleasure to award the Thomas Strack Award for Excellence in Amateur Astronomy to none other than Chris Miller. And it's also fitting that Jack and I are finally going to shut up, and he's going to finish the evening.
Congratulations. Well, thank you. And Dave. Thank you. Nice. Nice. Okay, yep. Thank you, Jay. Well, it's all on video, so whatever we do, it's going to be, you can capture the frame and do something with it. So, thank you. This is one way to get me to wrap up our session tonight. Thank you. You know, like Dave says, it leaves me a little speechless. I appreciate that. It was mentioned, and I think this is what the organization brings to us, is our dedication to helping others, and we take joy in that. It energizes us. And to also energize and to undertake, of course, the geeky experience. God, don't we just love it? I mean, where do you find a profession where being outside in the dark, you know, working on something and getting recognized for it? I mean, this is pretty amazing. And in the last, again, my partnership with the Grand Rapids Astronomical Association, again, I was able to say it straight, you know, began, you know, 6 years, it began actually my true all-in moment, you know, came after my wife passed away, and I was looking for another interest, and I think I found it. And for that, I also thank the association for giving me that opportunity, allowing me to be, you know, all that I can be. Gosh, I've heard that expression around somewhere before. And for all of the kind of, I mean, it's a wonderful legacy to follow on to build on. You know, I stand on their, you know, in their shoulders and hopefully embrace the same enthusiasm and the view looking forward that we have, you know, a bright future. And, you know, and again, and it's also a fellowship and community, and that we want to, you know, bring this forward. We want to be the positive force in our culture's, environment. And so, yay, let's go for it. With that, I want to also thank you all for your endurance and your ability to sit there. And I'm glad the church, I'm thankful to Brian in providing us with such comfortable chairs, because sitting here for coming on to 2 hours, actually, Dave, I will have to take exception to the hour-and-a-half rule that we've been here. So with that, we will bring to a close our evening's events. I want to thank everyone for making the effort again to be here today in this, you know, literally stormy weather that we've had, and to make this such a successful event. It's been joyous and good, very good. Thank you.